Hey guys, man, last week in revitalization and multiplication. And we've had a great time. And thank you for being such a wonderful class so early on Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings until we were so ingloriously relegated to our homes. Anyway, um, hey, just real quick, I don't have a PowerPoint here, but I have some work for you to do. In this last week, we're going to look at church planting, models of church planting. And so there's a video that I'm going to show you, just like about 15 minutes. So that guy's going to talk instead of me. And so he's giving a seminar in a church planting conference, and it's about like what's the important first steps. So I want you to take a look at that, and then there's some articles in Christianity Today you're going to see where Ed Stetzer lists 5 different kinds of church planting, and I want you to look at those, kind of review them, and then figure out which one would be most likely the kind you would do if you imagine yourself as a church planter. Which one resonates with your heart? So that's what I want you to do. Take a look at that and think about it. Like, what if you were planting a church, what kind of church would you plant? Speaking of that, I wanted to tell you about what kind of church I planted. So we had a wonderful church in the Northwoods of Wisconsin. We were running about 600 people or so at that time, and I would say 15 of those people came from a town about a half hour away. The town was Minong, Wisconsin, Minog. It's where they make Jack Link's beef jerky. So anytime you ever see Jack Link's, you think about our church plant in Minong, Wisconsin. Anyway, I found out that the only evangelical church in that little town had closed. It had shriveled up to nothing and it died. All that was left was a Lutheran church and a Catholic church. And Garrison Keillor said in Lake Wobegon, which is this fictional northern Minnesota town, which was just like the Northwoods of Wisconsin, in Lake Wobegon, you're either Catholic, Lutheran, or weird. And everybody needs a weird church, right? Every community needs a weird church. And I thought, well, they need something. They need an evangelical presence. They need a Bible believing, Bible teaching presence in this little community. Now, some of those people that lived in that little town, they had created a small group there, and they had been meeting every week. And so I called the leader of the group and I said, could I meet you guys over at the abandoned Nazarene church building? They had no idea why I wanted to do that. And so I got the key to that abandoned building, and they met me there, and they were all puzzled. And we sat in a circle in folding chairs in this dusty sanctuary. And I said, guys, isn't this sad? Isn't this super sad to see this building all closed up? This building that used to proclaim God's praises and stuff, and now it's shuttered, and like they're gonna maybe sell it, and it's gonna end up being like maybe a beef jerky storage place or something like that. And boy, it would just be really cool to open this up. Don't you think it would? And they went, no, that wouldn't be cool at all. We don't like that idea at all. So I thought my idea had bit the dust. But you know what happened the very next week? These guys were having a weenie roast. It was October, and they were roasting hot dogs around the fire at one of their houses. And one of the small group members said, I've been thinking. I love our church. I really do. It's the best church I've ever been a part of. But my neighbors are never going to take the drive all the way to Hayward. I think maybe we ought to try. Maybe we ought to do something for them. And then the next person around the fire said, I was thinking the same thing. And then the next one, and the next one, and then every single one of them, God was dealing with their hearts and telling them they needed to do something for their lost neighbors. They loved our church, but they loved their lost neighbors. and they wanted their lost neighbors to have the experience they had at our church. So they called me. They called me the next day. I was totally flabbergasted, surprised. They called, we're in. What are we going to do? And I'm wow, okay, well, we got to do something. Let's do a Christmas Eve service. How about that? They said, fantastic. We're going to do a Christmas Eve. Now, that's a great place, a great time to do church, you know, in a little North Woodsy town, because since everybody's Catholic and Lutheran, they all go to church on Christmas Eve anyway, even if they're not really a Catholic or a Lutheran, they still would be open to going to church on Christmas Eve. So we decided to do this Christmas Eve service. I remember we started doing some planning, and with some of the women of the church, they just got it all decorated. It was really pretty, and we did some planning meetings. One time we were having a planning meeting, and this young guy just walks in off the street. He said, I saw lights on here. I didn't think this church was meeting. What's going on around here? We told him we're planning. He said, well, that's really cool. You want heaven? That guy, he had just had such trouble in his life, and his heart had been so messed up. And he, just right there on the spot in our planning meeting, he gave his heart to Jesus Christ. That guy was a guitar player, so we put him to work at our Christmas Eve service. I'll never forget that Christmas Eve. I had 4 services back at my church, and that one was scheduled sort of at a staggered time, a little bit in between. And so I preached my sermon at my church, and then I ran out the back door, and I had a guy waiting for me in a 4-wheel drive because a snowstorm was right in the middle of it. I mean, just snow was piling down everywhere. And we made our way. We drove all the way to Minong, about a half hour away, through little windy back woodsy roads and stuff like that. And as we round the corner where the church is, everything's dark. And I was like, oh no. Nobody came. You see, the service had already started before I was going to get there. I had sent one of my assistants up and some musicians and stuff, so they were going with music and all that. They were supposed to be doing that, and I was supposed to come along and then do the sermon at the end. Oh no, they're not there. No, and then I realized we were at the wrong curve. And then we went around the next curve, and there it was. There it was. It was lit up like a Christmas tree. It was just, there were cars everywhere, just cars lined up all along the streets, and there was snow coming down, and cars lined up all the way along the road. I had to walk a long ways through the snow. And as I'm walking towards that church building with Christmas lights and stuff, and I heard the noise. I heard it. I heard coming from inside that building. Joy to the world, the Lord is come. Let earth receive her King. Man, that was awesome. That was awesome. I walked inside that building, and you know, it only seated about 100 people at that time, but it was full. It was completely full. There were people standing around the back. The entire small group, where they were standing in the back, they gave up their seats. And they were like, oh, look at this. Fred's here. Wilma's here. My neighbors are here. And so they were like, we've got to do something now. Let's start with church. How can we do it? How can we do church? There were about, I'd say 8 or 10 people that gave their hearts to Christ that night at that Christmas Eve service. And that small group, they got the bug. I mean, once you're bitten with the church planting bug, you'll never be the same. So I talked them into waiting at least a week. We waited till after New Year's. But then the first Saturday after New Year's, Saturday night, I said, okay, we can start with a Saturday night service. And so I drove up on Saturday night. I brought my daughter Hannah with me. She was just a little girl then. She brought her violin. I brought my guitar. I played, she fiddled, and we sang songs. Then I preached a sermon. There were about 30 people start with, at 30, 32, 35, 40, 45 over the next several weeks. And it was about, I would say, 5 months later, something like that. It was early. Well, it was like in May, I think May or June, when Ben Kidder, remember him? He was the guy who was on the video with me the other day. Ben came to see me. He was pastoring a small church in Iowa, And he was wanting to get some pastor advice. And so he came to see me. And as soon as he walked in the door, it was like the Holy Spirit said, there's your man. There's your church planter. It was just like Samuel and David, anoint him, anoint him. He's a church planter. I didn't say anything to him at that point. But that night I called him and I said, I can't get away from this. And I don't think you can either. But God wants you to come to Weinong and be a church planter. You need to do this for us, and you need to do it for the Lord. He's calling you. Are you going to come? And he's like, it took a few weeks. But then he figured it out. He figured it out that it was true and it was right. And so he came. And once he came, then they moved the church to Sunday morning, and then it started growing. And now they're running like 250 to 300 people. And they're planting a brand new church that's just up the road, about another 20 minutes or half hour north of them. And so it just keeps on going. That church is now growing. They have multiple services now. The church is absolutely beautiful. My last Sunday in Wisconsin before I moved down south to South Carolina, they asked me to preach at that church, my baby church. And I went in, I parked my car, and I had my Bible. I came just a little bit early. There was a greeter at the door. I didn't recognize the guy. He's like, hello, stranger, how you doing? Boy, do you go to church anywhere? We'd love to have you be a part of our church. The guy didn't even know who I was. And I was the guy that planted it. That just made me feel so good that there were so many new people there, leaders of the church now, that they didn't have any memory of me because they've all come since I was there. So God has a way of doing things. The most single greatest method of evangelism is church planting. It really is. You take a look. Just take some statistics. Take a look at any group and look at the new converts by profession of faith and the baptisms. And I'll pretty much guarantee you that the vast majority of those are coming from either brand new baby churches or multiplying churches that are starting campuses and satellites and stuff like that. Because God works most powerfully in new things. I hope that you would consider the idea that maybe God might be calling you to be a part of a church plant. It will rock your world, it'll change your life, and the whole world can be turned upside down because you cared enough to make a difference. God bless you guys. We've got one more of these. Well, it isn't really a lecture next time. It'll just be the final, and it's not really a test, it's the final project. So just be sure you got that done. Some of you already have it done, so you're good to go. We'll do one more prayer and encouragement thing, and I'll do a quick little video to wrap it up next week. God bless you guys. Have a good one. Bye.